Good morning. It is Monday, October 7th, in the unholy year of 2024. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. Well, there's a lot going on in the world as usual, but in some ways it's the same old. Middle East is still going the way it's going. People are waiting to see what Israel is going to do after Iran pulverized them with massive missile attacks. But probably there's going to be some sort of response. Everyone's waiting for it. If the smart money is right, it's probably going to be more of the same old. People keep being the hatred and the anger and the killing going. Israel is now doing to Lebanon what it did to Gaza. And doesn't seem to be there's anyone in the Middle East that is going to come in and help. There's always talk, but Lebanon has now become not so much a country as a geographical expression. But let's forget about that part of the world this morning. Let's return to the United States, which a lot of Americans are now realizing their government doesn't seem to care much about. I'm speaking, of course, of all of the unfortunate victims of Hurricane Helene in North Carolina especially, and the total neglect by the federal government of bringing aid and assistance to people who've lost everything, people who need food, water. You have people that are coming in from all over with their own food and water because the federal government doesn't seem to have the resources now. In fact, that's the reports going around that FEMA doesn't have any more budget. Of course, there's hundreds of billions of dollars for Ukraine and even more billions of dollars for Israel. But there's American helicopters and rescue operations in the Middle East, not in the United States. This is not so much the failure of the Biden administration, if it's still the Biden administration. No one's really sure what it is. Or even the failure of the federal government. Total failure of the federal government. This is the total failure of the so-called progressive, democratic, liberal, what is effectively Marxist, horribly immoral power behind it all. And I would say a week or so ago, I would think that it wasn't going to make much difference. They'll be angry, but they aren't really going to do anything about it. So I decided to take a little trip with a friend up to a place in Pennsylvania called Butler this past Saturday. Now, I don't consider myself a Trumper or a MAGA person. I don't wear a red hat or anything like that, but I have a journalist's curiosity and a sincere, deep-rooted desire to find out the truth. So I took the ride, which from where I'm at was several hours. Pretty long ride. We had to get up real early to get up there. And it was quite an adventure, I will tell you that. We arrived about 7 in the morning, 7:15 or so, about the time you're supposed to. Was directed to a parking area. The Butler Fairgrounds, by the way, has its own airport, which was shut down for the event, and we parked there. And it was a show, I'll tell you. But and I don't mean a show when Trump was there, I mean beforehand. You had people from all over the United States, all over, that were showing up to this. And this is not a bunch of crazies, although you have some of those. You do. You have to be fair and honest about these things. There are some people there that were dressed up as various people in history. It was interesting in that department, too. But you had people from just about every part of the country, from what I could gather when I walked up and talked to people. We had to stand in line for some time, actually. The gates opened, if you can call them gates, at 10 o'clock. So if we're standing until 10. And then you have to stand in line again to go through the Secret Service check, which was quite thorough. I've been through my share of Secret Service safety checks in my career. For a short time, I was assigned to the White House Press Corps. Vice President Gore was overseas. It was an interesting experience, but this was really tight and really professional, and that was reassuring. Unfortunately, one of the people I was with had a wallet that contained a small can opener inside, and he had to take his stuff out of his wallet and give it to the Secret Service. So might have to get him a new wallet there. But that's the level of security that they had implemented this time, and probably will for the future. And when you get in, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to get a seat in the bleachers. Well, no, those are already filled with people from maybe that joined a club or something, but for just about everyone else, we're standing. There's no lawn chairs. You can't bring in any lawn chairs. If you're lucky, you can sit down against the fence for a while. But it was quite a physical trial. I'm in pretty good shape for my age, but this was tough. You have nothing but damp ground, and you're looking at your watch and you're saying, wow, it's 11 a.m. and Trump's not going to be here till 5, and they're not going to start speaking until 2, and he's probably going to be late, and wow, so I better get something to eat. They only had a few vendors there with very long lines. Why they didn't have more, I don't know. That's not my call, but there was not a chance to get food that easily. So we had free water. The Trump people gave away a lot of free water. So you didn't get dehydrated. It was pretty warm, too, that day. So what do? You basically talk to other people. Everybody's there, and they're not there so much for Trump. This is what I found rather interesting and enlightening. They're there because they don't like what's going on. They're not there for Trump. They're there for themselves and their families and their communities. And that was something fascinating to see up close and personal. There were some jokes, of course. People had humor. We were noticing that you could see if you knew where to go. They had a lot of tractor trailers that had blocked the line of sight from where that shooter almost killed Trump back in July. But you could see the roof of the building, and there were a couple of people on top of it. So I guess they solved the problem of Secret Service agents standing on slopey roofs. That's probably going to be a T-shirt. And, of course, in the men's room, when you went in there, there were people joking that there were no tampons available, which was another bit of humor. But everybody was in this rather adverse situation for security reasons. They couldn't sit down. They couldn't bring in their own food. They had plenty of water, and they had to stand in line probably for an hour, hour and a half to get a hot dog, and they still were pretty cheerful. It was still a hard slog, but I got to talk to a lot of people. I got to hear a lot of people. I got to see a lot of T-shirts. American philosophy is broadcast to the world on T-shirts, and some of them are quite detailed, and you almost have to go up and start staring at a woman's chest to read what's on her T-shirt. That's usually considered rude in most circles. So it was still it was everyone showing off that they don't like what's going on, and they taught me one thing. These people are determined. These people are determined, and a lot of them probably are desperate. And not necessarily financially desperate, but just desperate for things to change, for the insanity to stop, for clown world to be destroyed. And that was reassuring. Anyways, the speaking started about 2 in the afternoon. Up until that time was a lot of music being played, and it was kind of nice because most of the music was stuff I grew up with. Mr. Trump is a few years older than I am, but he has a lot of the same taste in music I do, which I was told he chose it. He chose all the music that's played at the rallies, and I kind of enjoyed most of it. The speaking started about 2 o'clock, and all sorts of people started talking, and it got progressively more and more of importance until the big man showed up. But everyone, almost everyone that I can remember, mentioned the man who was killed in July, and that was the volunteer fireman Corey Compratore. And his family was there. They didn't come up on stage, but they were there. And much of the whole afternoon was dedicated to his memory. They had parachutists that came in, military parachutists that came in at the beginning of the event. And they had an artist on stage who created a painting live dedicated to the man. It was a memorial service. And it was one of that was very, very, very professionally orchestrated. That's one thing I learned at Butler, is that the Trump campaign is not made up of amateurs. These people really know what they're doing. They're very organized. They very much know what they want to do and accomplish at these rallies. But you have people from all over the country who are gathering, meeting, making new friends, swapping phone numbers and contact information. This is a very well-organized political machine, more than I ever thought, and certainly more than the mainstream media is giving it credit for. Anyways, this progressed throughout the afternoon. It was exhausting, and a couple of times I found myself lying in the wet, somewhat muddy grass. I had no choice. It was that tiring. You can't stand for that many hours without, some effect. And everybody else was bearing the difficulty just as much as I was, if not better. You had older people there. You had some people coming in wheelchairs. They were allowed. People with artificial limbs, a lot of those. Artificial legs, no doubt military veterans. And you had people 80 or 90 who were sitting on towels or blankets. That's one thing. They were selling towels going in, and I was wondering why they were doing that. And there were people that have been to like a dozen rallies or more. In fact, there are some people that were up in the bleachers that have been to more than 250 or something like that. Amazing. So, what is going on here? Well, these are people that are at the end of their rope emotionally, psychologically, and many of them probably financially. And they want change. And Trump is the man who is offering it to them. I knew that the people on the left side of the fence in this country were disconnected, but I don't think they have even a remote clue as to how disconnected they are, as how out of touch they are with the people of this country. North Carolina and the suffering of the people from that hurricane is ample evidence of how much they don't care about anyone but themselves. I could see why people get, one, addicted to these events because they're surrounded with people who think like they do. They can wear their red MAGA hats without worrying about someone walking up to them on the street and assaulting them. Think about that for a second. They believe in traditional American values, pretty much most of them, although you see all sorts of people there, including people in the gay community, people who are black, people who are Hispanic. There were Vietnamese Americans there. There were Koreans, Japanese. Oh, man, everybody was there. The Tibetans were probably there, too. I have seen Tibetans for Trump in some places, but didn't notice them this time. This was quite sobering, because these rallies are not made up of people who are just starry-eyed Trump fans who are fans of his old TV show. These are people that seriously, seriously, seriously want change and are demanding it. Anyways, eventually you had J.D. Vance show up, and he gave a very well thought-out speech and very well presented. And then you had At some point, you had Trump Force One, Mr. Trump's private airplane, I believe it's a 757, came in low flying and flew over the crowd. It was rather corny in some ways, but Americans like corny, yes. And if the plane came in, they played the theme song to the 1980s classic movie Top Gun. I kid you not. That was a little weird. That was a bit over the top. Well, the United States has gone over the top in some ways, so why not add a little more to it? Eventually, he showed up, gave his speech of the kind he usually does. One thing that wasn't presented so well on the live feeds that you saw is when he got on stage, he said, "As I was saying," and he showed that enormous graph, the one that he was looking at when he was shot back in July, and it was very well thought out, and that was very humorous. It was a good way of putting a positive spin on things at the beginning. He, of course, led a chant of Corey, who seems to have become a folk hero in the movement that Mr. Trump is leading. And then Elon Musk came on, and to have him on Trump's side right now shows how much the worm has turned. You have somebody who is, I believe, the richest man in the world right now by many yardsticks, but one that thinks and isn't owned by anybody. And he said something that is being talked about in the media and in many ways, in many places, misquoted. He did not say this will be the last election. He said if Trump doesn't win, he believes it will be the last election. That's what he thinks. He pointed out it was his opinion. It wasn't a declaration. So if anybody is saying that in the mainstream media, they are filthy, stinking liars, and they know it because they saw the same speech I did. Now, when he did say that, there was a noticeable gasp of reservation and dread from the crowd, because everybody kind of feels that anyways. At least those that are really worried about the future of the United States. When he said that, everyone was immediately sobered up. Elon Musk really changed the whole flavor of the whole show, and I don't mean just the one in Butler. The next 30 days, I believe it's 30 days or 29, it's less than a month now, it's going to be a real wild ride here in the United States. But it's going to be a desperate ride as well. And I have to warn the people who are leftist, who are in the cities, completely isolated from most of the country and most of the people, the Hollywood celebrities who are, frankly, I think some of the most useless political commentators in the universe. They're up against a very dedicated American public, because I promise you, for every person who was in Butler, there must have been 1,000 or more who really wanted to be there, if not a higher number than that. Now, like most such events, it was very chaotic leaving, very stressful, not too much fun. Everybody was hungry. Of course, the vendors always close up before the end of the show. They could probably make a fortune selling food as people are leaving, but yeah. We didn't get out of there until close to 10 p.m. But while we were going out, I noticed the automobile in front of me, which was a Ford Police Interceptor with black and white paint that had obviously been sold to civilians. It was no longer a police car. And I can assure you that from firsthand experience, a Ford Police Interceptor has some of the worst gas mileage on the planet. In that car was 4 or 5 people. I could tell in the night, with our headlights looking into their windows, about 4 or 5 people in the car, a couple in the front, maybe 2 or 3 in the back, not sure. The license plate was for Alaska. Alaska. Now, I don't know their story. I don't know if they picked up that car down the street, but chances are they didn't. Those people are probably following Trump around the country or at all of his events. You had 5 people in the car, probably a carpool sort of deal. That's how dedicated a lot of the people in the MAGA movement are. Because that gasoline for that car is going to be very expensive, but they're doing everything they can to follow the crowd and follow what's become another American dream of restoring the country to sanity. Now, I'm going to finish up this rather extended report and say this. I've said this from the beginning. The deep state's going to do everything it can that is legal and illegal to prevent Trump from coming back into the White House. I don't think they know what they're up against. If he doesn't get back, I think that there's a lot of possible truth in what Musk said. But I do know that the level of anger and desperation, but at the same time, the level of optimism I witnessed is going to be a mammoth task to try to keep that under control. And I'm not talking about violence. I don't think that would be a good idea at all. In fact, that's what they're set up to handle. But I could see quite easily probably the most widespread case of civil disobedience in the history of the world if he doesn't make it back into the White House. I think people are that fed up. In fact, if they're anything like the ones I got to see in Butler, they are very fed up. Trump also alluded in his speech that, hey, maybe they're out to kill me. They probably are, Mr. Trump, but they're not going to be able to kill the power that is behind you. This is a movement that he just happens to be at the head of. If something happens to him, they will have created one hell of a martyr. On the stage, of course, was his son, Donald Trump Jr., and his daughter, and a lot of other people who had shown up during the day. This is a massive movement that's not going anywhere, and it's not going to give up. It's not going to peter out. It's not going to vanish. There's an awful lot of strength there. When you see doctors, lawyers, truck drivers, retirees, young people standing around for a good 12 hours in the sun on a muddy field waiting to hear a message of hope, you have a lot to deal with if you're on the other side of it. It's going to be a very interesting month, and hold on to your hat. That's it for today. If you appreciate these podcasts and my writings, please like and subscribe, and please consider a paid subscription. It would be greatly appreciated. If you wish to contact me with ideas or thoughts, I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I can be reached up on X, Mr. Elon Musk's platform. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. I'm on other social media platforms as well, not on Facebook. You can also reach me at the original location of where these podcasts are, which is Substack, aureliancolumn.substack.com. That's aureliancolumn.substack.com. And you can send me messages there. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, Clown World must be destroyed. Good day.